So as she said, apparently I'm the social media guru. So about 2 days ago, I got a private message on Facebook from one of my friends. She hates her job. And she was hoping that my extended network might include a headhunter or two. Well, it doesn't. And so I apologized with that response, but my first thought that came into my head was I wanted to write back to her and say, just quit. Just walk away. If you don't like it, if you hate it, why are you there? That's the way I think. That's not the way most of the world thinks. Job equals security, equals salary, equals paying her mortgage and getting medical insurance. And she reminded me of that. But I still responded in the way that Jamie Good responds, and I asked her, but do you really want another boss? That's something I think a lot of us have felt sometimes. There's probably one job you had at one time in your life where you came back and you said to your friend over a beer, I hate my job. Job loss, though, is something that none of us really want to experience. In March 2011, I was unemployed. I was teaching ESL for years, and I was in a school, and the registrations went down. A lot of times, ESL schools, markets go up and down based on a lot of things. SARS, for example, almost killed the ESL industry when it happened years ago. March 21st, 2011, in the same month, I cried more than I ever have in my life before or since. It was a Monday, 11:30 a.m., my mother called to give me news that I never, ever had anticipated getting. I was 40 years old at the time. She told me that my father wasn't my real father. This was the father that the day before, on a Sunday afternoon, I had said goodbye to for the last time at Stratford General, because I knew it was time to do that. So 10 minutes after I hang up from my bum, Stratford General calls and gives me the news. So you can kind of imagine why I was crying as hard as I was. I was collapsed over the dining room table with a pool of tears, mucus, and saliva forming under my face as it flattened on the tabletop. It hurt mentally, physically, and emotionally. So what do I do now that I've lost a parent who wasn't really mine and a job? Well, I got to reinvent my life. But one thing I realized is not only did I need job security, I needed to heal my head and my heart. You can't be successful if you're not doing okay up here or here. I had other hurdles to get over first, namely PTSD, depression, and a little sprinkle of ADHD on top just for the fun of it. I was in a men's support group at the time because in 2011, I decided to dig in and fight the effects that I was having to deal with on a daily basis, which is named and manifested itself as PTSD, but the initial problem that I had experienced, or I wouldn't say problem, the trauma that I experienced that gave me the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, was childhood sexual abuse. I was part of a men's group at the time where we decided to dig in and deal with the after effects of our childhood sexual abuse. We were facing it head on and dealing with all the emotions involved. So no surprise that I've lost a job, lost a kind of parent, I'm dealing with PTSD, so what else do I have on my plate? Depression, of course, and I was taking meds too. So it wasn't really the best year I've ever experienced in my life, but I still decided to just go forward and do what I needed to do to get my head and my heart healed. So I went to a weekend of recovery. It was for men who have experienced childhood sexual abuse. And it was a really great experience for me because I learned I wasn't alone, but I also learned tools to take home with me so I could survive the emotions and the process of that healing journey. The most important thing that happened to me that weekend was learning about deep breathing and mindfulness. I'd never heard of either before in my life. Mindfulness is super trendy now, but at that time for me it was a mystery. So I learned how to do it. We had a mindfulness lunch. We actually sat there in silence while we were eating. And it sounds a bit bizarre, but it was such a great experience because we were present. We were paying attention. We were being mindful. How did the food feel in our mouth? The smells. We appreciated where it came from. It was such a nice experience. And then the next morning we had a mindfulness walk. We experienced smells, we experienced sounds and textures on the floor of the forest that we probably would have never experienced otherwise. And so for me, it almost became a mantra for me, this mindfulness and deep breathing stuff, so much so that I tattooed it on my arm, remember to breathe. Because for me, it doesn't matter what happens, I always have my breath. It's portable, it's mobile, it's free, and I can always resort to just breathing in and out nice and slowly, being mindful of it to help me get through stress. But I needed other coping mechanisms too. As I said, that was a pretty crazy year. So a couple of the other things I needed to add to my arsenal was learning boundaries and self-care. I remember my therapist at the time, she gave me a book and she said, this is about boundaries, I want you to learn about boundaries. And I'm like, okay. And I went home and I'm like, what the hell are boundaries? I had no idea. Boundaries between like Canada and the United States? I have no idea. So of course, being the techie guy that I had become, I got on my Kindle. And I opened my Kindle and I remember starting on the first page, which was a survey of your boundaries. And I was like, often, always, most often with all these things. And I thought, I have no idea what boundaries are and I don't have any. This is like crazy. So I need to read this book. So I did. Well, boundaries for me, one of the things that it included was learning how to say no. And also tree pruning, as I call it. When I was young, when I was a teenager, I worked in an apple orchard. I love that job because it's climbing trees and picking apples. Like, hello, that's so amazing. With the sky above you and you're out in nature, it's fantastic. But I learned about tree pruning, which I'm sure you know how that works. You take away the excess branches that are wasting energy for the tree so you get the best, the biggest, and the sweetest fruit. Well, I needed to do that too. I needed to tree prune. So if you were in my life and you were creating negativity or you were creating a toxic relationship for me, I cut you out of my life. I used to have 100 acquaintances. Now I have maybe 2, but now I have friends. And I have people in my life who motivate me and who are positive and motivated as well. The other thing I mentioned that I needed to learn about was self-care. My therapist told me that too, about self-care. I had no idea what that meant because I hadn't been doing it. So basically what I learned to do is reward myself, to celebrate my successes and my wins, no matter how small they were. So if I was working through my recovery and I had a difficult period of it and I made it through to the other side, I took myself out for a burrito or a movie. My favorite example of it, though, was Paris last year for Christmas. Oh my God. I studied art history. So for me, going to the Louvre was like, I can't even tell you, but I'll try. So I've always had a bucket list, and I try to check items off as regularly as possible. I did about 4 last year, and one of them was going to Paris and going to the Louvre. So imagine me wanting to go there since I was like 19. I was 43 last year, in case you're trying to calculate. Sorry, 44. And here I am going in the Louvre, and if you've ever been there, it is massive. I can't believe it used to be a palace for a family who was basically exploring the rest of the country to have this place to live. Incredible big place. So I go in and I'm like, where do I start? Rubens. The security guard told me it's wall-to-wall Rubens, so that's where I went. Up the escalators, down the hall, I walk into this room, wall-to-wall, gorgeous masterpieces, all Rubens. First thing I did was walk back out into the hallway and cry because I was like, I made it. And I was succeeding and celebrating the stuff that I'd done in the last few years, and it was amazing. If you don't celebrate for yourself, no one else is going to do it. So I dealt with my head and my heart. Now I needed a job. In 2011, I told my friend about my predicament, and he said the phrase, adult learning and development. Never heard of it before. I said, okay, what is this? And he told me about a program. So I thought, this sounds great. I have the background in teaching. I like teaching people. I'll do this. So I did the course, Master's Certificate in Adult Training and Development. I became a member of CSCD, and the practicum allowed me to do my CTDP, where I met Laura and Kate, as part of the practicum. So I became accredited. At the same time, though, I kept hearing about technology and online learning, social media. And I decided to do another course at the same time because, I didn't have much going on that year. And so I went to George Brown College and also did an online instructional certificate at the same time. So I've got dealing with PTSD, 2 courses, my father's estate, and I'm jobless. And yeah, it was quite a year. But I succeeded in all of it. I finished the course, I finished the other course, I got my accreditation, and it was amazing. And being connected to people on LinkedIn, etc., got me a job. It was in marketing. I had no marketing background, but the woman who sat across the desk from me in the interview, who ended up hiring me, said, your LinkedIn profile screams of value. And I'm like, That's great, but I have no marketing experience. But I told her that social media for me was like a free college course, and I was learning about digital marketing and tools all the time. So I got hired. Best pay I've ever had, best job I ever had, best team I'd ever had. I used to like going to work. Like I liked going to work. I walked there in the morning and I just loved that I was going to this job. The job that I lost this year in February. I was unemployed again. I had already reinvented myself once, so I knew I could do it again. And I felt a weight coming off my shoulders because my boss had become a micromanager and the team wasn't as cohesive and I'd become more frustrated. So I was actually fine with it, except for that nagging voice that says salary, rent, whatever. So I rebranded myself as the digital fluency coach, which is funny because in 2011, if I had a problem with my phone or my computer, I called my techie friends while I watched TV and they fixed my device. This year in March, I built my own website on WordPress and I'm now teaching people how to be digitally fluent online. Crazy, right? But what I did was I just dug in and I learned and I went forward, all the while being mindful of my breath, remembering to breathe, creating boundaries, pruning the tree, and doing self-care. So just dig in because you'd be amazed what you can do.